The noise of machines filled the giant hall. Metal arms striking, gears spinning, and smoke rising from broken pipes. The air was thick with heat and dust, making every breath heavy. In the middle of this endless noise worked a young alien girl. Her skin was pale and her arms shook as she lifted heavy boxes again and again. Her hands were covered with cuts and the fresh wounds mixed with old scars. She did not complain. She did not stop. Because if she stopped, the overseers would see her weakness, and weakness always brought pain. The overseers were tall creatures standing on platforms above the workers. Their eyes glowed red as they watched every move. They carried long rods that sparked with energy. Whenever a worker slowed down, the rods cracked like lightning, striking skin and leaving burns. The alien girl had been struck many times before. She carried the marks on her back, hidden under the thin cloth she wore. Humans were rare in this place, but today one human man worked quietly at the far side of the hall. He was new here and most thought he would not last long. His name was Ethan. He had strong arms and tired eyes, but unlike the others, he kept glancing toward the girl. While most workers kept their heads down, Ethan noticed the way she swayed on her feet, the way her hands trembled every time she reached for another box. Hours passed. The overseers shouted louder. The machines demanded more speed. The girl's steps slowed. Sweat rolled down her face, mixing with the dust that covered her skin. Her legs shook and her arms finally failed her. A box slipped from her hands and crashed to the ground. The sound echoed through the hall. Everyone froze. The machines kept moving, but every worker turned their eyes toward her. The overseers reacted at once. One of them jumped down from the platform, his rod crackling with energy. "You useless thing," he shouted, raising the rod high. The girl fell to her knees, too weak to rise. She bowed her head, waiting for the strike. She had been beaten before. She knew what was coming. But this time, before the rod could fall, a hand caught it in midair. It was Ethan. He stood between the overseer and the girl, his grip tight on the metal rod. Sparks jumped across his skin, but he did not let go. His eyes were locked on the overseer, calm but burning with anger. "Enough," Ethan said. His voice was steady, but it carried across the hall. The overseer hissed and tried to pull the rod free, but Ethan did not move. He stood firm like a wall. The other workers gasped, their eyes wide. No one had ever stopped an overseer before. The overseer snarled and called out to the others on the platform. More guards leaned forward, ready to jump down. The tension in the hall was sharp, like a blade pressed against skin. The girl looked up slowly, her eyes wide with shock. She could not understand why a human she barely knew had stepped in front of her. No one had ever protected her before. "Move aside, human," the overseer growled. "She is property. She must work until she breaks." Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced down at the girl, her small body trembling, her arms barely able to support her weight. Then he looked back at the overseer. "She is not property," he said firmly. "She's alive. She's more than this." The overseer let out a cruel laugh, sharp and cold. "You dare to speak against the rules? Then you will share her punishment." The sparks from the rod flared brighter, ready to strike. The other overseers were climbing down now, their heavy steps echoing across the metal floor. The workers held their breath. None of them dared to move, but every eye was locked on Ethan. The alien girl whispered, her voice weak, almost broken. "Please, don't. They'll kill you." Ethan crouched slightly, placing a hand on her shoulder. His touch was gentle, so different from the rough hands of the overseers. "I won't let them hurt you again," he whispered back. Her eyes filled with tears she could not hold back. For so long, she had believed kindness did not exist in this place. For so long, she thought her life had no value. But in that moment, with the human standing before her, she felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. The overseers surrounded them, sparks lighting the hall with flashes of blue. The machines kept turning, but everyone knew something had changed. The human had broken the silence, and nothing would be the same again. The first strike came. Ethan blocked it with his arm. Teeth gritted as pain ran through his body. He did not fall. He did not let go of the girl. The overseers shouted in anger. The workers stared in shock. The girl clung to Ethan's sleeve, her heart racing. She did not know if they would survive the night. But one truth was clear. This human had chosen to stand with her, even if it meant standing against the whole factory, and that choice was only the beginning. The hall shook with the overseers shouting. Sparks lit the air as their rods cracked again and again, filling the factory with flashes of blue light. Ethan stood in the center of it all, holding the alien girl close to him, his body ready to take the punishment. The other workers dared not move. They kept their heads low, but their eyes secretly followed the human. No one had ever seen such defiance before. The alien girl's body sagged against him. Her breathing was shallow and her lips were pale. She whispered weakly, "Let me go. I am not worth this." But Ethan tightened his grip around her shoulders. "You are worth it," he said firmly, his voice louder than the machine's. "You are not going to die here," the overseer in front sneered. His rod sparked again, hungry for another strike. But something unexpected happened. Ethan pushed the girl's head gently against his chest, and then, with his free arm, he swung the fallen box from the floor. The heavy metal container smashed into the overseer's side, knocking him back with a crash. Gasps spread through the workers. The overseer let out a hiss of pain and scrambled to his feet, rage burning in his glowing eyes. "You dare!" he roared. The other overseers rushed forward. Ethan lifted the girl into his arms, ignoring the burning pain that still ran through him from the electric shock. She was light, too light, as if years of hunger had hollowed her body. Her head fell against his shoulder, her eyes half closed. She was slipping into unconsciousness. Ethan did not think, he acted. He ran. The hall filled with chaos as guards shouted orders and workers froze in disbelief. The machines kept their endless rhythm, but now the sound was joined by heavy boots pounding after Ethan. He carried the girl tightly, weaving through the rows of machines, searching for a way out. Sparks flew as rods slammed against the ground behind him, missing him by inches. The girl stirred faintly, whispering again. Why are you doing this?" Her voice was so fragile, carried on the edge of her breath. "Because someone has to," Ethan replied, his jaw clenched. "And I won't let you die for their cruelty." He reached a side door, the one most workers never dared to approach. It led to the back corridors of the factory, dark tunnels filled with smoke and broken pipes. The overseers hesitated, unwilling to step into the filthy passage. They shouted for reinforcements instead, but Ethan did not wait. He kicked the door open and vanished inside with the girl in his arms. The corridor was narrow and filled with shadows. Steam hissed from cracked vents and water dripped from the ceiling. Ethan's footsteps echoed against the walls. He moved fast, but his mind was racing even faster. Where could he go? The overseers would soon search every corner of the compound. They would not stop until they caught him. The girl's head lifted weakly. She opened her eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light. Her lips trembled. "They will kill you." "For this?" "Maybe," Ethan admitted. His voice was calm, steady, even though his heart was pounding. "But I'd rather die carrying you out than watch you collapse alone." Her eyes widened slightly, as if the weight of his words reached deeper than the pain in her body. For so long she had been told she was nothing but property, a tool to be used until broken. But here was a human, someone she had never spoken to before today, risking everything for her. Her throat tightened and a single tear slipped down her cheek. The sound of metal doors slamming open echoed behind them. The overseers had sent more guards into the tunnels. Their heavy steps drew closer, voices calling orders. Ethan pressed his back against a wall, breathing hard, trying to silence his footsteps. He glanced down at the girl who clung faintly to his shirt. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Don't close your eyes yet." She tried to answer, but her strength failed her. She drifted into darkness, her body limp in his arms. Ethan swallowed hard. He could feel the heat of pursuit drawing nearer. His muscles ached from carrying her, but he refused to let go. He tightened his grip and pushed forward again, deeper into the maze of tunnels. At last, a faint glow appeared ahead, moonlight shining through a broken vent. Freedom lay beyond, but the sound of boots behind him grew louder, closer. Ethan sprinted the final steps, pushing himself to the limit. He reached the vent, slammed his shoulder against it, and tore the rusted metal free. Cold night air rushed in, clearing the smoke from his lungs. He pulled himself through and dragged the girl out with him. They landed hard on the outside ground. The factory loomed behind them, tall and monstrous, its red lights glowing like eyes in the dark. Alarms began to blare, filling the night with sharp warning cries. Ethan looked down at the girl in his arms. She was unconscious, her face pale but peaceful, as if the weight of endless suffering had finally lifted, even for a moment. He brushed the dust from her cheek gently. "You're safe now," he whispered. But even as he spoke, he knew the danger was far from over. The overseers would come for them. The hunt had only begun. Still Ethan stood, The alien girl cradled in his arms and walked into the darkness of the night. And for the first time in her life, she was carried not as a burden, but as someone worth saving. The night was silent except for the distant blare of alarms. Red lights flashed on the tall walls of the factory, warning every guard that two had escaped. A human and a weak alien girl. Ethan carried her tightly against his chest, his breath heavy but steady. The cold air cut through his lungs, but he did not stop. The girl was still unconscious, her head resting on his shoulder. Her body was too light, as if hunger had hollowed her bones. Each step Ethan took reminded him of the promise he had whispered. He would not let her die here. Behind him, the sound of metal doors opening echoed through the night. Guards poured out, their boots striking the ground in rhythm, their voices barking orders. Searchlights swept across the dark fields, beams of white light tearing through the shadows. Ethan glanced around quickly. He could not outrun lights and soldiers in the open. His eyes searched the horizon and caught sight of broken structures at the edge of the wasteland. Old storage sheds abandoned long ago. He headed toward them, his boots sinking into the soft earth. He slipped inside one of the sheds, the wooden door creaking as it closed. The inside was filled with dust and rusted tools, but it offered shelter. Ethan laid the girl gently on the ground, brushing dirt from her face. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment. She stared at him, confused, her lips trembling. "Why?" she whispered faintly. "Why save me?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Because you're not a tool. You're not property. You're someone who deserves to live." Her throat tightened, and for a moment she could not speak. Then her eyes closed again, and her breathing slowed. She had fallen back into unconsciousness. The sound of voices outside grew louder. Guards were sweeping the area, their flashlights cutting through the night. Ethan crouched low, his hand on the handle of a broken tool he had found, a rusted piece of metal, not much but better than nothing. The footsteps drew closer. A beam of light cut across the cracks of the shed door. Ethan's muscles tensed, his heart pounding. He glanced at the girl. She was too weak to move. If they found her now, both of them would be dragged back to the factory. The guards passed by, their voices fading into the distance. For now, they were safe. Ethan exhaled slowly, then leaned back against the wall, but he knew this hiding place would not last. He had to find somewhere more secure, somewhere the overseers would never look. He looked down at the girl again. Her face, though dirty and bruised, carried a strange softness. She looked young, younger than she should have been to face such cruelty. Anger tightened in his chest. What kind of world allowed this? What kind of people treated her as nothing more than a broken machine? The answer didn't matter. He had already chosen. He would not leave her. He lifted her again and slipped out of the shed, moving deeper into the night. The land around the factory was harsh, dry ground, broken roads, and fences topped with wire. Ethan moved carefully, keeping to the shadows, his ears sharp for the sound of patrols. Twice searchlights swept close, and he ducked low, holding the girl tight until the danger passed. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. His legs ached, his arms burned from carrying her weight, but he pushed forward. Finally, at the edge of the wasteland, he saw it, a line of trees dark and heavy, marking the start of the forest. If he could reach the forest, they might have a chance. He hurried forward, the alarm still distant but chasing him like a predator. He reached the first line of trees and stepped into the cover of the branches. The forest swallowed them in shadows. For the first time since the escape, he felt a spark of relief, but it did not last long. The girl stirred again in his arms. Her eyes opened, glowing faintly in the moonlight. She looked at him with confusion, fear, and something else he could not name. You should leave me," she whispered weakly. "They won't stop. Until you're caught. If you leave me here, you can still survive." Ethan shook his head. "Not a chance. You're coming with me." Her lips trembled. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. She lowered her eyes, unable to hold his gaze, and a tear slipped down her cheek. The sound of engines roared in the distance. The overseers had sent patrol vehicles now. Their searchlights cut across the edge of the forest. Ethan tightened his grip on her and moved deeper among the trees. Branches cracked under his boots, and the air grew colder. He found a hollow beneath an old tree and laid her down carefully. He crouched beside her, listening. The sound of vehicles was closer now. He pulled a broken branch into his hands, his only weapon, and waited. The girl's eyes half opened again. She watched him, this strange human who risked everything for her. Her lips moved faintly, whispering a single word she had never said before. Why? Ethan looked at her and gave a small, tired smile. Because no one else would. The sound of engines grew louder, closing in. Searchlights swept through the trees, beams of light hunting. The night was filled with danger. But in that dark hollow, the girl felt something she had never felt before. Safety. Even with the hunters closing in, even with death around every corner, she felt safe in the arms of a human who refused to abandon her. And deep in her heart, for the first time, she began to hope that maybe freedom was possible. The forest stretched deep and endless, its trees thick with shadows. Moonlight slipped between the branches, falling in pale silver lines across the ground. Ethan moved carefully, holding the alien girl in his arms, his every step slow but steady. Behind them, the sound of searchlights and engines faded, but he knew the overseers would not give up so easily. The girl stirred weakly. Her eyelids fluttered, and she looked up at him with tired eyes. Why are you still carrying me?" she whispered, her voice thin like broken glass. Ethan glanced down at her, his jaw tight. "Because you can't walk yet, and I won't leave you behind." Her lips trembled. No one had ever said such words to her. For so long, she had been told she was worthless, replaceable, only meant to work until her body gave out. She lowered her eyes, afraid of believing in his promise. The night grew colder as they moved deeper into the forest. Ethan's muscles burned and his arms shook from carrying her weight for so long. But every time he thought about stopping, he looked at her face and pushed himself harder. Finally, through the trees, he spotted a small structure, a broken outpost, abandoned long ago. Its roof sagged and its walls were cracked, but it still stood. To Ethan, it was a miracle. He carried the girl inside. The air was damp, but it was better than the open forest. He lowered her gently onto the ground, brushing dirt from her hair. She winced, trying to sit up, but her body was too weak. "Don't move," Ethan said softly. "You need to rest." She looked at him with confusion. Why are you kind to me?" "You don't even know my name," Ethan paused. Then he gave her a small smile. "Then tell me, what's your name?" Her throat tightened. No one had asked her that in years. The overseers only called her by numbers. Slowly she whispered, "Lyra." "Lyra," Ethan repeated, the name rolling gently off his tongue. "That's a good name. And it belongs to you, not to them." Her chest ached, but not from pain. She felt something new, something fragile, something warm. She turned her face away so he would not see the tears that slipped from her eyes. Ethan searched the outpost. He found broken crates, old blankets torn with holes, and a rusted container that still held a little water. He returned to her side, offering the water carefully. Lyra drank slowly, her trembling hand spilling some drops. Ethan steadied her cup, patient and gentle. "Better?" he asked. She nodded faintly, though her body was still weak. Outside, the night was not silent. The sound of engines still rumbled faintly, moving along the forest's edge. The overseers were searching carefully, sweeping the trees with their lights. Ethan knew it was only a matter of time before they came closer. He sat near the broken doorway, gripping a piece of metal pipe like a weapon. His eyes never rested, scanning the shadows outside. Lyra watched him silently. She wanted to speak but was afraid. Finally, her voice broke the silence. "You should run. If they find us, they'll punish you worse than me. Humans are not allowed to interfere." Ethan turned his head slowly. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried a fire. "Let them come." "I won't run." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She had seen courage before, workers who tried to resist, who shouted back at overseers. But they always broke, always fell. Ethan was different. His courage did not come from anger, but from something else. Something she could not understand. Hours passed. The forest grew colder. Lyra drifted in and out of sleep, her body finally resting after years of endless labor. Each time she woke, she saw Ethan still sitting by the door, still watching, still guarding. He did not sleep. He did not complain. When dawn finally touched the trees with light, Lyra stirred again. Ethan turned to her. His face was pale with exhaustion, but his voice was steady. "Morning, Lyra." She blinked at him in surprise. "You stayed awake all night?" He nodded. "Had to. You needed the rest more than me." Her heart ached in a strange way. She pressed her hand against her chest, confused by the feeling. For the first time, someone had chosen her life over their comfort. But before she could speak, A sound broke through the calm, a sharp snap of branches outside. Ethan stood at once, gripping the metal pipe tightly. His eyes narrowed, scanning the trees. Lyra's blood ran cold. "They found us," she whispered. Voices echoed faintly through the forest, harsh and angry. Searchlights cut through the morning mist. Ethan turned back to her. His voice was firm, steady. "Stay quiet, stay low. I'll handle it." Her lips trembled. "You can't fight them all." "Maybe not," he said. "But I'll fight enough to keep you free." Her eyes filled with tears again. She wanted to beg him to stop, to let her go so he would live. But when she looked at his face, she knew nothing she said would change him. Outside, the overseer's voices grew closer. Boots pounded against the ground. The broken outpost shook as they surrounded it. Lyra clutched the blanket tight, fear racing through her veins. Ethan stood tall, his grip firm on the pipe, his eyes locked on the doorway. The first shadow appeared at the door. The fight was about to begin. The broken outpost was no longer quiet. Shouts echoed outside. The overseers had found them. Ethan stood in the doorway, holding the rusted metal pipe like a sword. His eyes were sharp, scanning the trees. Lyra lay behind him, weak but awake, her body shaking from fear and cold. She reached out toward him, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't have to fight for me. I'm just—" Ethan didn't let her finish. Without looking back, he said, "You're not just anything. You're Lyra." Those simple words froze her breath. She had never heard her name spoken like that before. Not with power. Not with meaning. Outside, footsteps stomped through the fallen leaves. A deep voice called out, "Return the property, human. You have 10 seconds." Ethan stepped forward into the light. "She's not your property." A pause, then laughter. "Cold and cruel, you're alone. You think you can stop us?" Ethan didn't reply. He simply raised the pipe. The first overseer charged in, weapon sparking. Ethan ducked and struck fast. The pipe slammed into the overseer's leg, knocking him down. But another came right after, swinging an electrified rod. Sparks hit Ethan's side. He cried out in pain but didn't fall. Lyra covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. Every time he was hit, it felt like she was breaking. Ethan fought like a cornered animal, not with skill but with heart. He blocked, swung, and defended the outpost like it was his home. For him, Lyra was no stranger now. She was his responsibility. But the overseers were too many. 3 surrounded him, 1 struck him across the back, and Ethan dropped to one knee, gasping. "Stop!" Lyra's voice broke through the chaos. The overseers froze. Lyra dragged herself to her knees, her body weak but her voice trembling with fury. "You'll kill him. For helping me?" One overseer sneered. "You are a slave." "You are nothing." "No," Lyra whispered. Then louder, "I am not nothing." The air grew still. For the first time in her life, Lyra raised her voice without fear. "I have a name. My name is Lyra, and this human gave it back to me." The overseers laughed. "You think that makes you free?" Ethan used the moment. With a sudden roar, he stood again and swung the pipe. The blow hit the leader in the chest. He fell, groaning. The other 2 turned in anger, but before they could strike again, a deep growl echoed from the woods. Everyone froze. From the shadows, an old forest beast stepped out. Massive, covered in dark fur with glowing yellow eyes. A predator long feared by locals. The overseers backed away. The creature growled again and walked toward the outpost slowly. Lyra held her breath. "It's one of the wild guardians. They never come near people." Ethan stood in front of her, still holding the pipe even though he could barely breathe. The beast stepped forward, then paused. It sniffed the air. And then, to everyone's shock, it walked past the overseers and stood next to Ethan. Silent. Calm. As if it had made a choice. The overseers stepped back, unsure. "What is this?" Ethan didn't know, but Lyra did. "They know pain," she whispered. "These creatures can smell suffering. They protect those who have been hurt." The overseers looked at each other. One hissed, "This isn't worth it. Let's return. Let them die out here alone." They turned and vanished into the forest. Ethan dropped the pipe and collapsed to the ground. Blood stained his shirt. Lyra crawled to his side. "Ethan!" "No, stay awake." He opened his eyes slowly. "You yelled at them." "That was amazing." She gave a small laugh, tears rolling down her cheeks. "You're the amazing one." She ripped cloth from her sleeve and pressed it against the wound on his shoulder. You risked your life. For me. Ethan winced but smiled. Of course. I told you. I wasn't going to let them take you. The beast beside them lay down, watching the forest. Its warm breath puffed into the cold air. Lyra looked at it in wonder. I think we're under its protection now. Ethan nodded, eyes closing. That's good. I need a nap. She touched his forehead gently. Sleep, I'll watch now. And so for the first time, the girl who had always been protected became the protector. Soft light filtered through the forest leaves as morning arrived. The wild beast still sat outside the broken outpost like a silent guardian. Birds returned to the trees and the wind carried the smell of wet earth. But inside the shelter, the air was heavy with pain and worry. Lyra sat beside Ethan, her small hands pressing cloth against the wound on his side. His shirt was torn, his skin bruised, and dried blood stained the ground beneath him. He had protected her, fought for her, and now he lay unconscious, his breathing shallow. She leaned closer. Please wake up, she whispered. Her hands trembled. She had never cared for anyone before. No one had ever mattered enough. But Ethan, he was different. He didn't look at her like she was broken. He never asked for anything in return. He just helped. Her fingers brushed his forehead, and she remembered the first time she had seen him in the factory, standing in the heat, lifting heavy parts, always watching, but never speaking. She had avoided his eyes back then, afraid of humans, afraid of false hope. Now he was the only person who had ever made her feel human. A groan escaped Ethan's lips. His eyes blinked open. Lyra? He whispered. I'm here, she said, wiping a tear. You're alive. He tried to sit up, but pain made him gasp. She gently pushed him back down. Don't move. You need to heal. Ethan gave a weak smile. Are the overseers gone? Yes, she nodded. They ran because of the beast. It's still guarding us outside. Ethan's eyes widened slightly. Then we're safe. For now, but Lyra wasn't sure. They'll come again, she said. They won't give up so easily. He looked at her seriously. Then we'll be ready. But we need help. I can't protect you alone next time, Lyra swallowed. She had an idea, but it scared her. There's someone. An old worker who escaped years ago. He lives deeper in the forest near the river. They say he used to be a rebel. Ethan nodded. Then we find him. She hesitated. He might not help us. He trusts no one. Ethan winced but tried to sit up again. Let's take that chance. With her help, Ethan stood. She supported him, her body still weak but her spirit stronger than ever before. Outside, the beast watched them silently. When they stepped into the light, the creature stood and followed. As they walked through the trees, Lyra stole glances at Ethan's face. His jaw was clenched in pain, but he kept walking. She didn't understand how he could be so determined. Why do you keep helping me? She finally asked again, her voice soft. Ethan looked at her. Because I saw what they did to you, and I couldn't stay silent. I know what it feels like to be treated like you don't matter. She blinked. You? He nodded slowly. I wasn't always free. I was once trapped too. Not in chains, but in another kind of prison. A place where I had to follow orders or lose everything. I escaped, but I still carry the pain. Lyra stopped walking. You understand? Ethan gave her a sad smile. More than you know. They walked in silence for a while until they heard the sound of running water. The river. And near its edge, hidden beneath vines and branches, stood a small cabin made of stone and wood. Lyra pointed. That's it. Ethan stepped forward and knocked on the wooden door. Nothing. He knocked again. Then the door creaked open and a tall alien stepped out, his face aged and scarred. One of his eyes was white blind and he held a rusted blade in his hand. Who sent you? He asked coldly. No one, Ethan replied. We're not here to fight. Just to ask for help. The alien looked at Lyra. Recognition flashed in his eyes. You're one of the factory slaves. I thought they killed all of you. They tried, Lyra said quietly. The alien's eyes shifted to Ethan. And you? A human risking his life for her? Ethan stood tall despite the pain. She's not a slave. Not anymore. The old alien stared at them for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. Come in. But if you lie to me, I'll cut you down myself. Inside the cabin, it was warm and dark. Old weapons lined the walls and maps covered the table. The man poured them water and handed Ethan a cloth for his wounds. My name is Kale, he said. I once fought to free workers like her, but we lost. The galaxy didn't care. Lyra's voice trembled. Do you still believe in freedom? Kale looked at her. I stopped. Until now. Outside, the forest swayed in the wind. Inside, a new alliance was born. The kind that could change everything. The old cabin smelled of ash and age, filled with silence and stories long buried. Kale sat at the edge of the wooden table, sharpening a rusted blade. Across from him, Ethan leaned against the wall, bandaged but awake. Lyra sat close, watching both men, one scarred by his past, the other wounded for her future. Kale's one good eye stared at Ethan. They'll come for you again, boy. And next time they won't bring rods. They'll bring soldiers. Ethan nodded. Then we don't run. We make a stand, Kale scoffed. You think two broken souls and a half-dead beast can fight the system? The beast, still outside, lifted its head at the word beast as if offended. Lyra spoke softly. We don't need to destroy the system. Just show others it can be defied. That silenced Kale for a moment. He looked at her, really looked. Not as a former slave, not as a weak girl, but as someone who had survived and still had fire left in her. I buried too many good people, Kale said. But maybe it's time to dig up some old hope. Ethan stood. Then help us, Kale nodded once slowly. I will. By the next day they had set the trap. The clearing near the river was perfect. Open space, one way in, one way out. Kale's old gear, mines, wires, smoke bombs still worked. Ethan carried a pulse rifle Kale had repaired, while Lyra wore simple armor pieced together from metal scraps and cloth. She touched the side of the armor awkwardly. It doesn't fit right, Ethan chuckled. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to make you look dangerous. Lyra smiled shyly. Do I? He paused. You look brave. That made her heart flutter. Not because of romance, but because someone believed in her strength. At sunset, the overseers arrived. This time they didn't send guards. They brought soldiers in dark armor, their faces hidden, their weapons heavy. Hovercrafts floated over the trees, engines roaring like thunder. Ethan stepped out of the shadows. Rifle ready, Kale was in the trees above, watching through an old scope. Lyra stood behind Ethan, her legs trembling, but she stood tall. One soldier stepped forward. Return the girl. Surrender now or be erased. Ethan raised his voice. No. The soldier tilted his head. You're outnumbered. Kale's voice crackled through a hidden speaker. We know. Then the trap sprang. The ground exploded beneath the soldiers. Smoke filled the air. Flashes of light disoriented their vision. The beast roared from the trees and charged into the confusion. Throwing them into panic, Ethan fired short bursts, never to kill, just to scatter. Kyle took down 3 from above with perfect aim, but it was Lyra who stunned them all. As a soldier raised his weapon toward Ethan, she threw a smoke grenade between them and tackled the man from the side. The blast knocked them both down, but Lyra got up first. She grabbed the fallen weapon and pointed it at the others. Back off, she shouted. The soldiers hesitated and, for a moment, just a second, they saw something. Unfamiliar, not a slave, not a victim, but a rebel, a fighter. The commander gave the order to retreat. The hovercrafts rose and pulled back. They didn't expect this fight, and they didn't want to lose more men. As the sounds faded and silence returned to the clearing, Ethan dropped to his knees. It's over. He breathed. Lyra stood beside him, her hands shaking. We won. Kale stepped out of the woods holding a broken headset. Not won, but survived. And survival is the first step of rebellion. The beast walked calmly back to the group, letting Lyra place a hand on its thick fur. Kyle looked up at the sky, where the crafts had vanished. They'll remember this. They'll whisper it in fear. Ethan looked at Lyra, and others will hear too. Later that night, they lit a small fire near the river. Kale cooked roots and dried meat. The air was still and peaceful. Lyra sat next to Ethan, her body sore but her heart full. I was nothing, she said softly. Until you saw me. Ethan shook his head. You were always something. You just needed someone to remind you. She smiled gently. Then maybe. We remind others too, he raised his cup. To freedom. Kale joined the toast. To fire in the dark. The beast huffed beside them, eyes glowing, almost in agreement, and so, in the middle of a forgotten forest, far from the factories and the pain, 3 broken souls, human, alien, and beast, made a promise they would not bow again. They would not be silent. They would stand. And from that moment, stories began to spread of a human who carried a dying alien girl and gave her a name, a voice, and a reason to rise.